All right, I think most people are in, so let's get started. Thank you all for joining us today to talk about the front of pack symbol and the research that we did. So my name's Lindsay. I'm the VP of Marketing and Communications here at CHFA, and I am joined by Ashley, who's our Director of Regulatory Affairs and Policy. So we're going to walk you through some of the data that we found from our consumer research, as well as some of the fundamentals from a regulatory side of things. So before we dive in, just a quick few housekeeping things that I wanted to cover with everyone. So this webinar is being recorded, and you will get a link to the recording after the fact, so you can rewatch it, as well as a copy of the slide decks. And you'll see when I pull them up, there's quite a bit of information on them. So really yours to dive into. Of course, though, if you have any questions, we're here to take the questions at the end. So just pop them into the chat at the top of your nav there. I do want to say that the chat is public, so everyone can see your questions. So just ask that everybody be respectful. So yeah, do you want to dive in, Ashley? Okay, let's do it. So everyone bear with me as I share my screen. Nothing like having to share your screen with a bunch of people watching you, but here we are. And we're going to set it to presentation mode. So hopefully that looks good for everybody. Okay, so let's get started. So being able to provide our members with really valuable insights to make better business decisions is something that is really important to the work that we do at CHFA. And the reason we did this is late last year, we were actually on an advisory call with some of our other members, and it became pretty apparent to us how big of an impact front of pack labeling changes would be, and how many in our space were really not fully up to speed on what was coming. And so when we're thinking about our research studies for the year, we're always really looking to have a big impact with a broad spectrum of our members. And it just felt like, digging into the front of pack symbol and how it would be perceived by consumers as a whole, and also how it relates to brands in our space would be just a really good fit. I do want to say that lots of questions may come for this. We did partner with one of our friends at Brand Naturals. They've provided some really great insights onto not just kind of understanding the information, but what to do about it. So if you are a CHFA member, again, you can access the full report by logging into your member portal. If you're not a member, and I would like to recommend you become one and join this community, you can also access a sample report, which will take you through more of the information that we cover here today. So lots to dive into, but let's get started. So I'm going to hand it over to Ashley, actually.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. So I'm joining Lindsay today just to give a bit of an overview on the regulatory context behind the front of pack labeling. Most of the session will focus on consumer insights, but for those of you that may have missed our other sessions, we had a webinar back in January and a session at CHFA Now. Wanted to give a bit of a background. So this summer actually marks 2 years since Health Canada announced new labeling requirements for the front panel of packaged foods, and specifically these requirements apply to foods that are considered high in saturated fat, sodium, and sugar. The reason for these requirements was because Health Canada has identified saturated fat, sodium, and sugar to be nutrients of public health concern due to their association with health risks. So even though these nutrients are actually found on the nutrition facts panel on other parts of the label, Health Canada believed that Canadians will reduce their intake of these nutrients if they're more easily identifiable on food packaging. So that's the reason behind the requirements. They were announced 2 years ago, and now we're educating you, our members, on kind of what are the requirements, but also what are the consumer perception of these requirements. So if you've heard of FOP labeling, that's what this is. It's called front of package or FOP nutrition symbol. And that's what that symbol is on the right hand of your screen there. So as I mentioned, it's required for foods that are considered high in these 3 nutrients of concern. The threshold of what's considered high is based on a % daily value of these nutrients found in the food. So for most packaged products, the symbol will be required for 15% or above of the daily value of these 3 nutrients. And in those cases, if your product has 15% or more daily value of sodium, sugar, or saturated fat, this symbol will be required on the front of pack or the front panel of your product label. The presentation of the symbol here, you'll see we have one example. It's presented in a manner that's very prescriptive by the Food and Drug Regulations. I'm not going to get into the specifics now, but if you're interested, check out that other webinar we have, or you can always email us with any questions you have as well. But there's specific measurements about in specific type heights. It must be in the upper half panel of, or sorry, the upper portion of the panel, and there's some other considerations as well. This one is the standard unilingual symbol, but you can have an English only and a French only symbol if you have two different panels for English and French. As well, there are some exceptions to the 15%. Like there are some exemptions for shipping containers, military, salt, sugar, those types of things are also exemptions for foods with reference amounts that are smaller than 30 milliliters or smaller than 30 grams. They would have a 10% threshold instead of the 15% threshold. And there are some differences in thresholds for main dishes as well, which would be a 30% threshold. So I think for the purposes of today's conversation, I would say all companies that manufactured packaged food should be evaluating your products to see if you need to put this symbol on the front of your packaging, and then to understand, we'll go through some consumer insights onto, how to best present things and how to present your product if it is requiring a front of pack symbol. So I think that covers kind of the why and the who that are affected by this. I'll pass it back over to Lindsay, and then if there's any questions at the end, I'd be happy to pop in and share some more on the regulations.
Thanks, Ashley. Yeah, always good to get a foundation of who this is going to impact and how. So let's start by talking about the methodology. So this was an online qualitative study that we did that surveyed over 1,600 Canadians over the age of 18 years. And this is really recent data. We conducted this survey from February 2nd to 20th of this year. And I do want to call out that the sample size is statistically significant, and it did ensure that we had distribution across regions, age, and gender. Now, if you have joined us before on any of our webinars or maybe checked out some of our past research studies, you'll know that there is one segment of the population that we track study over study. And this particular segment is called our super wellness consumer. And they're a consumer group that is very important to our industry. They are really engaged in the natural, organic, and wellness space. They are the first to try new products. They are recommending products to family and friends. And they're the ones that family and friends come to for advice. And we really like to make sure that we track them to understand where there is statistical significance versus Gen Pop. And we do know that they're a leading indicator of what's going to happen in our industry as well. So again, if you ever see this acronym SWC, that's referring to our super wellness consumer. And I do want to say they have an incidence of 13% in the versus general population, which is really consistent to past studies that we've done as well. So let's start by, again, kind of setting some of the foundations. So we wanted to understand what types of information did people want to see on the front of a package. So at this point, nothing to do with the FOP symbol. Think if you're standing in front of a store shelf and you're looking at a bunch of principal display panels, what types of information did consumers want to see? And so what you're seeing on this slide is how various attributes ranked. And I just want to call out where there are statistical significances, those are shaded in green. So an interesting one that really bubbled to the top was this made in Canada or local claim. And this was also reflected in the verbatims as well. People are really looking for easy to understand information about where the product was grown or produced. And that's especially true of females and also those that were in the 55 plus category. Now, what was interesting, however, in the number 2 spot was that some form of nutrition symbol that let people know when a product was over a certain threshold of a specific ingredient was really important. And we see this also true it's more important to women, again, those who are over 55, and also those who have kids in the house. So again, really thinking about clear and concise information. From there, we wanted to dive a little bit more into the top nutrition information that people wanted to see on the front of a package. And probably not surprising to anyone on this call, but sugar, calories, and protein were in the top spots. And again, you can see through the shading where our super wellness consumer had a statistical difference versus the general population. And across the board, they're just looking for more nutrition information. And that makes sense. They're again really engaged in the category. Again, those in the 55 plus cohort, they again want to see more types of information. And I think that makes a lot of sense. You know, people who might be of an older age might be looking to make sure a particular food meets within a specific dietary or health goal. So let's dive into the front of pack symbol itself. And so here you can see that we wanted to gauge the initial reaction that people had to this symbol. So we asked survey respondents, if you saw the front of pack symbol on a food product that you were considering purchasing, what do you think your initial reaction would be? And 44% of people said that they think they would reconsider buying the product, or they would choose one without the label. And this is especially true for those who read nutrition labels frequently, so 52% versus 26% of those who rarely or never read nutrition labels. And this really starts to give us an indication that this symbol will have an impact on purchase decisions, and it could be quite substantial. So this particular slide starts to look at the influence of the front of pack symbol. And what's interesting on this slide, when the question was framed a little bit differently around would it make you more or less likely to purchase the product, it actually became pretty split versus net more and net less likely to buy the product. Now, one thing I do want to call out that was interesting, again, when the question was framed this way, is our super wellness consumer, or those with a higher knowledge of nutrition, tended to over-index saying that it would be net more likely for them to buy the product. And we are doing a bit of inferring here from some of our other reports, but we actually know that our super wellness consumer tends to be more skeptical of products in general. Again, they're really, engaged in the category. They have their own opinions on health and nutrition. So again, we're making some leaps here, but it could be that displaying the front of pack symbol might actually help increase levels of trust within this particular community. And that element of trust is something we can see play out here. So I think on this slide, what's interesting to see is that the front of pack symbol was actually viewed very, very favorably. About 8 in 10 people had a positive reaction to the front of pack symbol, believing that it would help them make healthier choices. And again, this is something that's especially true for those in older age categories. And when I talk about that element of trust, 6 out of 10 people felt that it improved brand trust, and especially true for the Gen Z demographic. But here is where I've had to kind of get comfortable with it. My marketing brain is, making information easier for people and building brand trust isn't necessarily going to result in a product purchase. And you can see this when we ask people to think specifically about their favorite food. Respondents were pretty split on how that would shift their purchasing habits. And again, you could think your favorite food was healthier than you thought it was, and maybe now it's not as healthy as it seems, so you might start to switch it up. And again, we can see this play out with our super wellness consumer. They definitely, when they were asked previously how it would impact their purchase of a food, they over-index saying net more. But when we asked them to think about foods that they purchased on a day-to-day basis, a significant amount of them said that they would actually avoid products or brands that carried that symbol. So again, depending on the types of food people are asked to think about, or depending on how it fits within their life, they have a different reaction to this particular symbol being on that product. Now, the whole point for this study was really to start to understand how the front of pack symbol would impact natural, organic, and wellness products. So specific to now products, we asked respondents if they would be influenced by the front of pack symbol. So unlike previous questions, this isn't about would you be less or more likely to buy the product. This is really, would seeing that symbol have an influence on you in some way? And 52% of respondents said, yeah, it would likely influence me in some way. And our super wellness consumer is more likely to say that the symbol would either likely or very likely influence them in some way. What's interesting, Men were more likely to say that the symbol was unlikely to influence their decision to purchase a brand in the natural, organic, and wellness category. So again, we wanted to drill down a little bit more into this, and we asked people to agree or disagree with a variety of statements about the presence of a front of pack symbol on now products. And 2/3 of people or respondents said they appreciated that the symbol was on a natural, organic, and wellness product, and they thought that it would help them make more informed choices. But about half of the people said they would actually avoid these products. Men said they were more likely to say the front of pack symbol would not change their purchasing habits in this category, while younger people who were under the age of 35 said that this labeling on natural, organic, and wellness products seemed contradictory. And our super wellness consumer was more likely to agree with all of the statements. So, what can we do about it? So we know from this research, and as well as seeing the front of pack symbol or a variation of a front of pack symbol roll out in other markets, is that it will have an impact on purchasing patterns. So we asked respondents what features or information on the front of a product's package would make you more likely to choose that product. So think about mitigating against some of the negative perceptions that a front of pack symbol may have. And depending on who your target market is, this can play out very differently, but definitely things like having super clear and simple labeling, claims around sugar or fiber content really had a positive impact on helping to mitigate against any of those negative perceptions. And we'll give another shout out to our partners on this study, Brand Natural. They are really big champions on not just slapping all sorts of claims on your label, but really being strategic about your product, being really thoughtful about your brand and what types of claims and attributes that you want to highlight to, again, really reduce any of those negative perceptions that the symbol may cause. Now, from a product formulation standpoint, we also wanted to ask respondents about how some of the following factors would improve their opinion of the product. And again, probably no surprise, but things like sugar, protein, and fiber content, as well as that made in Canada claim, really helped improve the opinion that someone has on a product. So again, if you are thinking about your brand strategy or your formulation, these are really interesting things to keep in mind if you are reformulating down the road. Oops, sorry, I hit too soon. So definitely a lot to unpack. There's a lot of data on this particular slide deck. I do want to say, though, I think it's not all doom and gloom. I think, understanding who your consumer is, what they're looking for in a product can really help to mitigate against any negative perceptions that the front of pack symbol may cause. And like I said, being really thoughtful and strategic about the elements that you really want to highlight on your label will go a really long way in creating opportunities for you to rethink claims, design, how you design your packaging, your labels, or also how you reformulate going down the road to help mitigate against any of these changes. So that was kind of a lot going on there. And just open it up to questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I can't see anybody, including Ashley. So we're going to stop sharing and open it up to questions. And again, just a reminder for anyone who dropped in late, you can pop them into the chat. So yeah, we've got one question. What other types of research has CHFA done? So this is actually our 4th report. We have done research around attitudes in general to health and wellness and to our industry. That was a report coming out of the pandemic because we did hear that interest in health and wellness had shifted over the pandemic. So really wanted to understand what that meant to consumers. We've done a research study on inflation and how that impacted the purchase of products in our space. Obviously, our front of pack research, and our new one is coming up in November. Although if you are joining us at CHFA Now Toronto, you'll get a little sneak peek of it. But we are looking at macro trends and forces. So things like climate change, the concept of rewilding, sexual wellness and health, and how all of those are shaping our purchase decisions within the natural, organic, and wellness space. So that research is literally hot off the press. We just got the first draft of that yesterday. But like I said, the first glimpse of that will be at CHFA Now Toronto, and then we'll have the full report launching in November of this year. Go ahead, Ashley.
Sorry, this wasn't a question, but I did drop it in the chat. Just wanted to let everyone know with regards to the impacted dates. So any companies that are impacted by this will be required to carry the symbol on their products by January 1st, 2026. And I've said, in other words, that kind of means you have between now and December 31st, 2025 to make sure that you come into compliance. And the timing of that is going to be the manufacturing or the import. So it's the import date or the date that products were manufactured. So if products were manufactured before, they're manufactured in retail or in transit before January 1st, 2026, they can remain in the warehouse, they can remain and continue to be sold on store shelves until the inventory is depleted, but it's anything that's manufactured or imported after that date.
Thanks, Ashley. Those are good dates to remember. And in our full member report, as well as the webinar that you did earlier in this year, I believe we actually kind of gave a rough timeline of all of that as well, so that people could access. And I think there was a question around the previous webinar that we did. That is available to CHFA members. We will send a link out as part of the recap email on this, but it is gated to members. So if you are a member, log into your member portal and you'll be able to watch that. Lots of great information from a regulatory and an operational standpoint in that particular webinar as well.
I saw another comment in the chat regarding the presence of an FOP symbol and how that might actually impact what claims can be made or what restrictions are made on claims. So yes, for sure. Like sugar, fat, and sodium, they are important factors. Important factors part of the nutrition profile of a food, but they're only kind of a portion of that profile. And therefore they should only be a portion of your product's story. So there are a few restrictions with regards to claims that wouldn't be permitted, but it doesn't eliminate all possibilities of claims. You can still say things about the product that are positive, that are not associated with sugar, saturated fat, or sodium. So for instance, you wouldn't be able to say, you know, the product is unsweetened in a product that has a high in sugar front of pack symbol. But you can't, it doesn't restrict from all claims altogether. So I just wanted to clarify that.
So as a non-reg person, Ashley, can I ask you, so if I had a product that maybe was high in sugar, but also high in protein, could I still make the high in protein claim knowing that consumers are looking for that as an example?
Yes. Yeah. As long as, so high in protein is a bit of a difficult one. So as long as it meets the requirements to make a high in protein claim, and protein's a little bit different than other nutrients. It's not just the content or the quantity, of the protein, but you have to consider like the quality of the protein. So as long as your product meets the requirements to make that claim, yes, that is a fair claim to make.
Great. And I think that's why it's really important to have some of or take a look at the attributes that we have in the report or in the slides as well, like understanding your consumer and the types of information they're looking for is going to be really important to bring that to light on on your package as well. Any other questions coming through? I'll give it a second maybe. So again, this was really meant to be a quick dive. We didn't want to spend too much time on a beautiful summer's day. Well, I'm in Montreal, actually. I should say it's sunny here, although I hear if you're in Ontario, it might be stormy and I can't report on BC. But we will send out the slides. Please dive into them. If you have any questions on the research itself, we're always here to answer questions, whether it's on the methodology or if you need us to dive into some of the other segments that weren't shown on these slides, happy to do so. And like Ashley offered, also happy to help answer any of the regulatory questions as well. This is a big thing that's hitting our industry, but I think there's some just positive news in it, and we can definitely make sure that we're all set up for success and really hopefully positively impact purchase decisions. So hopefully everyone enjoyed today. Get a little bit of time back in your calendars, and we'll send that email and the recording out shortly.